To give batters a different look, pitchers throw a changeup.
Your idea of a different look is sunglasses.
That's true. But La Quinta Inns and Suites is really taking the different look thing to a new level.
Definitely a major league makeover, starting with a bolder, brighter lobby full of comfortable spaces to let you settle in.
Or chill out in front of a big flat screen like Wingo would.
Oh, you know it. It's a changing La Quinta look to help you get in the zone and look sharp when you hit that big meeting.
Prepare to win at business with La Quinta Inns and Suites.
Book now at LQ.com.
This is the best of the Dan Le Batard Show with the Stugotz podcast.
Happy Thursday, everybody. Sarah Spain and Mike Golick Jr. filling in for Dan and Stu. I don't know what they're doing. I don't know why they have a 8-day vacation. But you got us today, the Dan Le Batard Show with Stugotz on ESPN Radio, the ESPN app, and Sirius XM Channel 80. Gojo, you know what the guys are up to?
No idea. I figure this is one of those situations where when you can flex, you do. So if they can get the days off, why not?
Is it a holiday I'm unaware of?
I don't think so. Usually, does your calendar on your phone do that weird thing where it puts all of the bigger holidays in there, like Arbor Day or the start of Ramadan or something like that?
Yes.
That's the only way I know if there's some sort of non-mainstream holiday going on.
The only thing I'm seeing right now is something that says Stick to Sports Day. I think maybe the news of the day, it just felt right to have Dan not have a microphone in front of him.
Yeah, that makes sense. They knew that would be weaponized against them in a way that the larger government wasn't comfortable with.
Yeah, there's a lot going on today in the old Stick to Sports situation. We're going to get to that in a little bit. We also have a bunch of athletes getting arrested or generally causing a nuisance. But I wanted to start with last night's game because I'm still confused, Gojo, as to how two teams can look so completely different at home and on the road, and particularly the Cavs. I don't understand how you could be in the East Finals and not care enough to hustle for balls and play defense. Like, the only thing that seems to motivate the Cavs to play a complete game is if their fans are rooting for them, which seems very fragile.
Yeah, to have such a huge difference, because home road differences never made a lot of sense to me when I was playing. Like, I don't know how you felt about it, but I always enjoyed being on the road. Like, there was that little extra in being the renegade there. But to see this, especially from the veteran team, like, you could understand if it was the 19-year-old Celtics that on the difference between home and road, which they are, we're a little bit extra at home because of all that energy. But all these guys in the Cavs are really old. We make a note of that every chance we get.
Yeah, I don't know if you saw the photo going around of Kyle Korver with Allen Iverson when they were teammates, and someone's like, this is the only reason we know that Kyle Korver is 37 years old. It's the only proof.
Also, my favorite unlikely odd couple pairing, like Kyle Korver next to Allen Iverson, is
good
probably the
buddy cop movie.
It's the original version of the J.R. Smith Kevin Love buddy cop movie that I really want. Watching that, anytime something good happens for the Cavs, I just wait to watch those two celebrate together, and it fills my heart in a way that almost nothing else does.
I agree, except for I feel like Korver's intense religiousness actually ups the ante on the Iverson-Korver combo versus Love-Smith.
That is true, because AI was like the cultural shift in the NBA that everyone always points back to and just could not be further. And Kyle Korver cites him as one of the biggest influences on his young career, says he took him under his wing. So there were very real interactions happening between those two guys.
I love that. I feel like, so I'm not surprised to hear that you liked playing on the road, because you strike me as someone who would get a little bit fiery about trying to disrespect the opponent on their home field.
Yeah, it comes with the territory. You like being in that environment where you feel it's 300 style, where it's just you and this ragtag little battalion trying to go into some place.
Yeah, Notre Dame is a real ragtag little battalion.
Yeah, well, you know what?
Scrappy underdog.
You always think of us really overcoming the odds.
Yes.
It's in the song.
I wish someone would pay attention, too. You guys never get any credit for anything you do.
People don't talk about that nearly enough.
No, they really don't talk about Notre Dame.
But I guess that's the point, is I never understood this idea that home field mattered that much to you. But in this series, it's been the entire difference. We just sit here now, and we were talking before the show, we could have just skipped last night's game and the game that's coming up in this series and gone to Game 7 and just told these teams, hey, this is the one where you'll win. The Celtics, you get it at home, and whoever wins this one gets to go on.
Right, and then we get to a Game 7 where, in theory, the pattern should continue, but everyone's convinced themselves that if LeBron is involved, it will be completely flipped on its head.
Yeah, you seem pretty out on this, by the way.
On which, in general?
Just the idea that LeBron James should be the sole reason that we believe in something happening in this series or beyond.
Yeah, no, it's not that I don't get... Listen, LeBron had a decent game last night. When he has 26 points, it's not enough, especially when the rest of the Cavs starters have 24 combined points, right? He needs to go off for them to have any chance. So I'm not in any way diminishing LeBron's effect on this team, this series. He's the only reason they're anywhere. I think it's the playing it forward that everybody's doing, saying it would be a disaster if the Celtics were in the finals. I get the point. It's way more exciting. There's way more stakes to have LeBron potentially in his last game with the Cavs be fighting for some sort of legacy and to try to beat out the Goliath to his David and the Warriors, and that seeing LeBron take on other superstars feels more exciting than seeing a bunch of Celtics guys that are good players but aren't huge names. But I guess if you're thinking realistically and logically, why do people think the Cavs would have better success against the Warriors than a team that's actually the best defensive team in the league, has a great coach with a great game plan, is incredibly efficient, actually follows through and is disciplined, versus a Cavs team that can't beat that Celtics team? Why do we think a Cavs team that can't beat the Celtics is going to have a better shot against the Warriors?
Well, I think the word that you mentioned in there, it's the biggest problem, is logic. Most of it is not based in logic. If you want to explore something that might make sense, it's just this idea that because the NBA is such a league where one player can turn things around, you can start to justify LeBron James being enough of a difference. But it really is just seeing is believing. We've seen LeBron James and the core of this Cavaliers team get over that hump. We haven't seen it from anyone else with Golden State, so it's hard for us to really buy into that. That's all the logic people really need is, we're in a headline-driven NBA to begin with. The quality of the games, especially in the last few playoffs, has been a lot of blowouts, but we get by in enough big names and headlines the way this league does, and it's why the offseason's such a great product for them.
Yeah, and I think, the Warriors-Cavs matchup feels redundant and boring. But if you feel like either one of those East teams is going to get rolled anyway, it might be more interesting. There might be more stakes to LeBron going in there with this ragtag bunch and seeing what he can do versus the Celtics team that's one of the youngest in the league and is way ahead of schedule, right? So if you don't even have Irving, you don't have Hayward, you've been kind of injured all year, and you're only going to get better because you've got some draft options and you're going to get back healthy guys, then if they lose, you're like, whatever. They've got a huge future in front of them, right? So it's, I guess, whether you want to see the next era of the success in the East start now with the finals, or whether you want to hang on to the way things have been the last 7 years with LeBron leading the way going into Golden State and probably getting whooped.
It is sort of wild, too, because you talk about the interesting factor. The Celtics, everything you need to know about them is the fact that their head coach is the only one that we really single out by name. Jason Tatum might be pushing through the fray a little bit, but
Horford a bit.
A bit, but we just tend to single out Brad Stevens the same way we do LeBron James on the Cavaliers side, which kind of lets you know. And I saw Charlotte Wilder, who we're friendly with on Twitter and works at SI now, wrote an article. Would we be more apt to like this Boston Celtics team the way they're made up if they weren't from Boston?
Yeah, absolutely.
That seemed very obvious when she said that to me.
Yeah, and that's what I was going to say is if you think about it, it's a pretty amazing story. It's a pretty cool story. You've got this young upstart coach who kind of went straight from a mid-range college team straight into great success at the NBA. You've got a GM who's pulled all the right strings to set up this great lineup of kind of unexpected stars. And then you've got these massive injuries that sort of taken him out of the whole thing, and here they are. And instead of us being excited about it, we're like, oh, but it's the Celtics. So it doesn't feel like, it's kind of like Notre Dame. It doesn't feel like a young upstart little battalion that's going in there to face, LeBron and the Goliaths. Well, it's the Celtics.
And it's the Celtics, but it's also the Celtics and the Patriots and the Red Sox and the Bruins and all, and that kid at the parade with the sign full of all the championships. We see this and we're just like, yeah, we're all just kind of over watching their success, and it's messed up, and we should just, hope that our teams are better and not that their teams fail. But we're all human, and we look at that and we just kind of say the same reason we're sick of Golden State. Like, we're ready to turn the page on you, Boston.
Which is kind of unfair because the Celtics haven't been. I mean, the Celtics are just finding their way back into it, and we're already ready to turn the page on them.
That's one of those, though, where I forget how long ago when the Celtics Big Three came together and one was. Like, when people tell me that 1998 was 30, almost, 20 or 30 years ago, whatever the number is, my math is horrific, I'm sorry. but I refuse to believe it because the 90s seem like yesterday to me.
I really hope 1998 wasn't 30 years ago or we're very old.
Yeah, that is. No, yeah, I guess it would be 20. Either way, 20 years ago for 1998.
I know, that's gross.
Ugh.
It's really gross. Hey, interesting note, though, that, we talked all of the beginning of this round and last round about how boring it was. We had such a great first round of NBA playoffs, and then everything was a disappointment, blowout. And yet, here we are with both of the series up until last night tied 2-2, and it was only the third time in the last 20 years that both conference finals were tied at 2-2.
Wow. All right, so we've managed to overcome it with those numbers. We'll see if we can get... I mean, last night's game was... bad. The Western Conference Finals game before that was close enough. I guess it's how much do we need? That was just 4 quarters of blowouts. Yeah. I don't know if you saw the way that game ended up working out, but each team basically blew out the other one in a quarter. I said this about the Western Conference game the other night, that it reminded me of a drunken bar fight. Like, it was really ugly, and
right.
Everyone was getting these big shots in. That's what last night was, but it was all haymakers in the fight. It was just 2 drunks throwing the hardest punches they could, and each landing them until someone finally fell down, and it just happened to be the Cavaliers drunk.
It's Sarah Spain and Mike Golick Jr. filling in for the guys on the Dan Le Batard Show with Stugotz on ESPN Radio, the ESPN app, and Sirius XM Channel 80. Straight ahead, we're going to go all in with a 25-inch tapeworm and see if you can beat it.
Dan Le Batard.
Do you refer to the yellow sauce at a hibachi restaurant as yum yum sauce? 57% of the audience said no.
Stugotz.
Do you go ginger yum yum, yum 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 yum, or yum 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 yum? 38% of the audience said yum 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 yum. So they get 3 yum yum sauces. They ditch the ginger, get 2 yum yums with an additional yum yum. Second place was ginger yum yum. That Chris said earlier, no one goes ginger. 18% of the audience goes ginger. And 18% of the audience also goes yum 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 yum. How about that?
This is the Dan Le Batard Show with the Stugotz on ESPN Radio.
Sarah Spain and Mike Golick Jr. filling in for the guys on the Dan Le Batard Show with Stugotz. And I want to read you, this is the time in the show that Dan likes to call reading to you, a quick story about a NHL prospect. He revealed that he had a 25-inch tapeworm hindering his performance on the ice in the winter, and he detailed how he discovered the parasite. Carson Mayer, a Columbus Blue Jackets prospect who played for Miami University last season, told The Athletic he was suffering from loss of appetite, weight loss, and a lack of energy. He said it wasn't until he went to the bathroom in February that he discovered what was plaguing him. Let's pause right there for a moment. If someone said that they were sick for a long time, months and months, and it wasn't until they went to the bathroom that they discovered what's plaguing them, what would you think was going on?
I would think it was something normal, like what I deal with on like a weekly basis, an indigestion, just your average run-of-the-mill bad batch of eggs.
Extreme case of diarrhea.
Not a 25-inch tapeworm.
Okay, I'll continue. Meyer told the news outlet the tapeworm and all of its parts came out of him. He said it looked orange. I FaceTimed my mom and was like, what the hell is this thing? Meyer said, I was freaking out, absolutely freaking out. Carson's mother, Holly, told The Athletic she'd never been so horrified. I was trying to be calm, she said. He showed me everything, and I remember saying, you have to get that to the trainer and figure out what it is so they can get you fixed. Doctors believe the parasite was Diphthyliobothrium latum, nailed it, which comes from eating undercooked fish. Meyer says he has since lost his appetite for fish.
Yeah, I go back for a lot. Like, don't get me wrong. I found, I think I found a chicken talon in a Chipotle bowl one time, or like something like that. And I still go back. Like, that's not going to deter me. A tapeworm might be the difference.
So if I go, as Dan does, all in on 2-foot tapeworm living inside you, that then, and by the way, just for those who don't know, when you poop out or puke up worms, they are still alive. So you're looking in the toilet bowl, and you're feeling it as it comes out.
Oh.
And it's a 2-foot worm, and it's wriggling around and moving and squirming out your butt and into the bowl. If I go all in on that, is there any other of the many parasitic, foreign body-related ailments that we've heard of and read about in horror stories that you could say is worse than a 2-foot tapeworm?
Would you think like one of those bot flies, the ones that get caught and almost look like a blackhead or something poking out of the skin in your back, but then you go to pop it and it's just a live fly, like a giant fly that gets popped right out of your back?
Oh, I haven't seen that. I've definitely seen weird, gross, bulbous things that are growing on someone and it pops but I've never seen it be a fly. Does it fly away?
I don't know if they're like what condition they come out in, and that's usually the point where I turn away in disgust from the video. Like, especially, how when you hear something gross like this, you immediately start touching the area? Like, I've been holding my butt since you started reading.
Yeah, like a full pucker. Like, I just Googled about the spiders under the skin, because remember there was that one that went viral about a spider burrowing in a man's skin and living there, and it turned out that it was fake. It wasn't real.
Oh.
But there's a YouTube with a photo that I just covered with my hand because it's too much. And it says, monster spider found a new home under man's skin. Doctor removes spider. Like, I don't think I can click on it. I think it's too much for me because I don't need to see the visual.
I can't decide which one I think is worse, though, because I really hate spiders. Like, I had a spider drop on my lap in the middle of a ride to work, and I pulled over and this is at 3 o'clock in the morning when I'm usually driving in for my radio show, and I pulled over and I searched in my car on the side of the road until I found and beat the spider to death. Like, that's how out I am on spiders. But having to pull 2 feet of worm out of my butt would probably be a hellish enough experience to top that.
Yeah, I'm trying to think. I feel like there's something about it being your butt that makes it better somehow, because it's like farther away from you and your butt is already gross in general.
Butts are pretty gross. Didn't this used to be a diet trend, though?
Yeah, so this is really gross. So back in I want to say Victorian ages, women used to intentionally take a tapeworm into their bodies, and then they would use it to lose weight. So basically, they would, once it was in there, it would kind of prevent them from wanting to eat. It would make them, lose their appetite. So they would literally take a pill with a tapeworm egg in it, and then it would hatch inside them. It would grow, and then it would eat whatever you eat. So it takes up all of the food and whatever. You lose weight, and you don't have to worry about what you're eating, and you're not hungry anyway. And then, when it was time to get rid of the tapeworm, they would put a moist piece of cheese or a glass of milk either in front of their mouth and have it come back out their mouth, or in front of another orifice, and wait for the tapeworm to wriggle its way toward the juicy, fresh dairy product.
I mean, I have a lot of questions. First off, I hope someone's told Dan about this option. Second, this has been the key to my weight loss. And third, who would choose mouth over butt in that instance?
That's a fair point. That is a fair point. Maybe depending on if it's easier to get it out the mouth because it's, I don't know, because it's more of an open hole.
I want to put that on the poll, but I feel like a poll that says butt or mouth is probably going to be
taken. No, I think you got to do that.
Yeah, can we just put that on the poll, butt or mouth? Put it on the poll,
Billy. Butt or mouth. Also, this particular story that I found on the horrifying legacy of the Victorian tapeworm diet on Atlas Obscura has what appears to be a very old artist rendering of an Asian culture where this occurred. And it is literally a bowl of milk in front of a man kneeling over pantsless and a tapeworm coming out of his butthole. I
feel like this has a chance to really take off now, right? Like, remember the old...
According to this story, Kourtney Kardashian has already said on Keeping Up with the Kardashians she wanted to get a tapeworm. Khloe Kardashian.
Like, do you remember that old school commercial? Like, are you gelling? Like, it could be now, are you worming?
Girl,
I'm worming like a vermin.
You look fabulous. Are you worming?
I've been taping for about a year now.
You look like you have tuberculosis, but also really skinny. Are you worming?
Gee.
Don't know if it's worth it. I just don't know. It's Sarah Spain and Mike Golick Jr. filling in for the guys on the Dan Le Batard Show with Stugotz on ESPN Radio. Coming up, we're not going to be able to stick to sports. Sorry.
Dan Le Batard.
And finally, the shortest, most concise tongue twister is toy boat. Try saying that 5 times fast. Toy boat, toy boy, toy boy, toy boat, toy boat.
He came closer than I did. Toy boy, toy boy, toy boy.
Stugotz.
Everybody, let's go around the room. Chris, what do you got? Give us 5 straight toy boats. Say it as fast as you can.
Toy boat, toy boat, toy boat, toy boat, toy boat.
This is the Dan Le Batard Show with the Stugotz on ESPN Radio.
Can we please talk about how many times I've tried to say toy boat fast in my car alone, listening to the podcast when they play that rejoin, and how many times I have absolutely failed?
Never even made it as close.
I can't even get through 2. When I heard Chris do that, I literally was driving and my mouth dropped to the floor and I was like, "What?"
He's gifted.
I've often said that I will never do that again because once I've done
Try
it
it right
once,
now.
He can't do it.
Did you not hear what I just said?
No, he can't do it again. He's tried and failed multiple times.
I will try it. For you guys, I will try it right now.
Wow.
Ready?
Yes.
Big day.
Toy boat, toy boat, toy boat, toy boat, toy boat.
Wow.
What? That was much more impressive than the first time because the pressure was on. The first time I was like, "Oh, I'm not going to get it." Wow, I did it. That might be your finest moment, other than obviously winning the race, which was clearly.
I'm proud of you, Chris.
Mic drop.
ESPN Radio is presented by Progressive Insurance. The Dan Le Batard Show with Stugotz is brought to you by Pennzoil Synthetics. Taking synthetic motor oil performance to a whole new level. Make the switch to Pennzoil Synthetics today. Guests on the Dan Le Batard Show appear via the Shell Pennzoil Performance line. And now your Sports Center update. Should be led by Chris at this point. But Jeff Gordon, Davey Allison, Jack Roush, Roger Penske, and Alan Kulwicki have all been voted into the NASCAR Hall of Fame class of 2019. The San Francisco 49ers have taken a minority ownership stake in English soccer club Leeds. And finally, earlier this week, Instagram announced Instagram Mute, which gives users the ability to secretly mute people, avoiding their posts without unfollowing them. Wow. Been waiting for that one for a while. Wedding season is upon us, and the easiest way to look fresh for your big day is with thebblacktux.com. The Black Tux has awesome suits and tuxedos that you rent online. To get 20% off your purchase, visit thebblacktux.com/Dan. For all the latest headlines and information, tune into SportsCenter on ESPN Radio all throughout the day.
So, I don't really think as much on Instagram about whether people are following me or not. Like, I guess the only way you know is if you go to their profile and you can click follow back. Then you know that they're already following you.
Yeah, because it doesn't give you the same message that Twitter does that lets you know they're following you.
Right, and when you go to their profile, it doesn't just say following you, like the way it does on Twitter. You can immediately check if someone's following you.
Well, because
I don't know if I would need mute as much, because I don't know if people are really paying attention, like, is she following me or not?
Well, that's like the classic Instagram model move, is to follow somebody and dumb person goes, "Oh wow, this really good looking person is following me. Clearly they want to talk to me and be in my life." And then you follow them back and they unfollow you so that their ratio goes up.
I have a question for you. So I was talking to Mina Kimes and another Molly Karam when I did that podcast roundtable, and we were talking about how the worst place on earth is the Instagram direct messages folder.
Oh, yeah.
Which I didn't know existed forever. And so when I finally happened upon it and realized that there are a bunch of people that want to message you and you have to accept them first if they're not someone that you follow, and then it's just photos, and thankfully Instagram blurs them out. I don't know if you know this.
Yeah, no, I've seen that before.
Yeah, so it'll blur them, and then you can say whether you want to accept it or not, so that, you know, you're not just bam, penis. So I'm wondering, do you, Gojo, have you been sent, photos from ladies who are down with the Gojo?
No, that's the one thing, is every guy has this idea in his head that every Snapchat, every Instagram DM experience is always going to lead to something like that. And it's always just dudes who want to talk about work. It's 100%. Even when I get sent a blurry picture, it's always a blurry picture of like someone doing something really fat or a food product, but they blur it out.
Just a bunch of donuts.
It's like when you bleep something on radio, you can bleep any word and it sounds a lot worse. I get that blur feature and I'm like, all right, I'm about to see something at least a little bit racy, and every time it's like a fat guy eating a donut without his shirt on. So no.
There was a guy, so I just checked mine for the first time in like about a year and a half, and there was a guy who sent me alternating photos for a full year. I haven't responded once, of his meal and then women's feet. So like on a random day, it would be whatever he was eating. It was like his plate of food. And then like a couple days later, it would be just some random chick's feet, and then back to some food, and then some random chick's feet. And that was it. For a full year.
Women's feet on the internet are a pretty hot commodity, I feel like. You
know, our buddy Reese Waters has a foot thing.
I do remember that.
Yeah. That was an interesting discovery for me.
Proud of him for admitting that, though.
Yeah, I remember there was a dude on The Bachelor that had a foot thing. It didn't go over well.
I can't imagine it would. Not when you've got your pick of the litter.
That's true. Unless you're into that.
Hey,
you never
to each
know.
their own.
You never know. So the NFL stuck it to themselves yet again, thinking that they got a big win. And it seems like they might have played themselves and have only created more of an issue surrounding the protests during the anthem. And I wonder, Gojo, when you're looking at this particular situation, which is clearly so divisive and which has resulted in so many people spinning and twisting and removing any context from what Colin Kaepernick started to the point where they're unwilling to talk about the cause of the protest, only the protest itself. Is there any way to go back and recover the point of it, or have we gotten to a place where it's so politicized that there's no way to have a real conversation about police brutality? Instead, it's always going to be about whether it's patriotism or what side of the aisle you're on.
Yeah, so that's the interesting part of this, right, is that the idea of distancing, and the players, I mean, distancing themselves from what this has become would, before all of this was ruled on by the league and by the owners making this decision, have been a worthwhile discussion. Is there a way that we can do this now that allows us to take back control that was robbed from us? The problem is that now the NFL has put players in a position where it's a lot harder to do that because you're having something dictated to you, and we're all human, and that's a poor place to have to try and respond from, especially in a league where you're constantly told it's a partnership, even though you know the power imbalance has never really borne that out in a real way.
Yeah, there was, and I'm going to forget, and I should remember his name, but the sort of well-known Green Beret, Nate Boyer,
yes,
who said after the NFL ruled that there would be new rules for the anthem, you could either stay in the locker room and come out afterwards, or if you chose to protest and not show quote-unquote proper respect, the details of which were not delineated, if you didn't show proper respect, then your team could be fined. And it was up to the team to decide whether the owner would pay, the player would pay. U.S. Army Green Beret Nate Boyer said, "Today it feels like this national divide isn't even really about the anthem or the flag or kneeling or sitting or fists in the air. It's not about the military or even police brutality. It feels like it's about winning. This winning mentality seems to have spilled over into an obsession with being right and not willing to admit that maybe, just maybe, we were wrong." And this is fully buoyed by the fact that Vice President Pence tweeted out a photo, a sort of infographic about the NFL's new rule, and wrote "winning."
You saw that. You saw Donald Trump Jr. had a post that was pretty similar. And it's exactly right. It goes back to what's at the core of this. And something I know Chris Long, who's spoken a lot about this in support of his teammates, has always said. He said he was the commencement speaker at UVA. And he said if you love something, look at it critically and try and make it better. But no one wants that. No one wants to be challenged. No one wants their idea of America challenged. No one wants their idea of what they believe is right or wrong challenged or questioned in any way. And so I think he's absolutely right in that assessment. This is just about wanting comfort and believing you're right.
Yeah, and I think also at this point, it's just about standing your ground, right? Whatever
Yes.
side I'm on, it's not about finding a connection in the middle where we can agree on anything. It's about digging deeper. And President Trump said today, "I don't think people should be staying in the locker rooms. You have to stand proudly for the national anthem, or you shouldn't be playing. You shouldn't be there. Maybe you shouldn't be in the country. You have to stand proudly for the national anthem." So not only does the NFL not get the quote-unquote win they're looking for by placating their concerns about whether Trump or other political figures will speak out and make this an even more politicized event, but they've lost again and furthered the conversation by angering both sides and causing Trump to up the ante from beyond sons of bees to essentially they should be deported.
And that should scare people. No one thinks about the rule from the other perspective. You always come at rules and things that are cast down on the side that you will come on, the side of power, and not, what if I was under the thumb for some reason? What if my cause was the one under fire? And I have a feeling that would change a lot of people's tunes.
Coming up, we'll continue talking about this because I have a question about what Gojo thinks the NFL should have done. Does anyone have the right answer? It's Sarah Spain and Michael Jr. filling in for Dan and Stu on the Dan Le Batard Show with Stugotz.
Catch more of the Dan Le Batard Show with the Stugotz, 10 to 1 Eastern on ESPN Radio and ESPN News.
To give batters a different look, pitchers throw a changeup.
Your idea of a different look is sunglasses.
That's true. But La Quinta Inns and Suites is really taking the different look thing to a new level.
Definitely a major league makeover, starting with a bolder, brighter lobby full of comfortable spaces to let you settle in.
Or chill out in front of a big flat screen like Wingo would.
Oh, you know it. It's a changing La Quinta look to help you get in the zone and look sharp when you hit that big meeting.
Prepare to win at business with La Quinta Inns and Suites.
Book now at LQ.com.
Don Le Batard.
Stugotz is disgusting.
Stugotz.
Yep.
This is the Don Le Batard Show with the Stugotz on ESPN Radio.
Sarah Spain and Mike Golick Jr. filling in for the guys on the Dan Le Batard Show with Stugotz on ESPN Radio, the ESPN app, and Sirius XM Channel 80.
ESPN Radio is presented by Progressive Insurance. Cars, homes, boats, motorcycles, RVs, and more at Progressive.com. Guests on the Dan Le Batard Show appear via the Shell Pennzoil Performance Line. And now your Sports Center update. White Sox catcher Wellington Castillo will be suspended 80 games for violating the league's joint drug agreement. Amari Stoudemire said on Wednesday that he's considering a return to the NBA. And finally, what? Why are guys doing this? Just stop. Him and T.O., stop. And finally, a 23-year-old man in eastern China had to be rescued by police after his soon-to-be ex-girlfriend bit his tongue and refused to let go. According to onlookers, the bizarre incident happened when the man had asked to break up with the 26-year-old woman, and she wanted a last kiss. Officers had to use pepper spray on the woman to free the man, according to police.
Don't Google that one, because there's a photo, and it's not super close up, but just the fact that there's enough people gathered around a woman who's kneeling and has got her teeth clenched down is enough.
The fact that you're willing to say that after posting a cartoon picture of someone pulling a tapeworm out of a butt should tell you everything you need to know.
So true.
Guys, you know me. I like to be in the action. If you need tickets to the game or your favorite band, look no further than Vivid Seats, the official ticket partner of ESPN. Vivid Seats has options to fit your needs. Make sure you get to vividseats.com/ESPN today for an exclusive discount offer. For all the latest headlines and information, tune into SportsCenter on ESPN Radio all throughout the day.
Sarah Spain and Mike Gojo with you. Mike Gojo? Just Gojo. Or Mike Golick Jr. It's really either one.
One of those.
That guy. So we've been talking about this anthem decision, and it was almost unanimously decided upon. And I guess there's a lot of outrage about what it says about how they feel about their players, about their right to peaceful protest, about their social activism. And I think that we all can agree that this has become so divisive that it's very difficult to make a decision that will please everybody. But they've certainly made a decision that displeases a lot of the players. And I wonder what they could have done differently, because you can't put, the genie back in the bottle. Once it's come out, there wasn't support for Kaepernick. There wasn't defense of the players kneeling and the cause that they were kneeling for. It's really hard now to speak out about it. But I think, Mike, that the best answer would have been, first of all, to work with the players on a decision versus completely ignoring the NFLPA's role in this and blindsiding them with this change, which is not collectively bargained. So I suppose they can change the rule, but it's not officially a rule. But also, I think beyond talking to the players, understanding that once you've already reached this point, if in order to not further divide and make both sides even angrier, there was probably a way to rejigger this so that it's about the cause again, instead of making it again about patriotism, because I think that's the flaw.
I wonder in this which owners really drove this conversation, because I remember hearing Dan Graziano say when this was, before it was voted on, that there wasn't a consensus among the owners about what should be done, if anything at all. And so that makes me wonder who was driving this, because we remember every time this seems like it had been going away and we had turned the page, some owner, and in a lot of instances, I remember Jerry Jones came out and made some comments that put his players in a tough spot and just does enough to re-aggravate a situation. And I thought we had gotten to the point that you were talking about, Sarah, where we had turned the page on the anthem protest part of this and started talking about progress. When the owners met with the players, that to me was something that was significant because we had heard things about actual listening going on. Roger Goodell and a lot of these owners seemed compelled to finally sit down and greet these guys as equals in a way that almost no other issue in the league could have really prompted. And instead now we're back to a place where they've shut them out entirely. I texted Dominique Foxworth, who works with us, writes at The Undefeated, and was formerly one of the heads of the NFLPA, and I asked him, does the league have to consult the PA on a rule or policy change? And he said it depends. They often have players on committees to discuss some things, and then they go and make their own decision. But in this case, I think leaving the players out entirely, if you can't just leave well enough alone, which would have been the best result, consulting the players and making them a part of this is the only way you were going to get through this, at least mainly unscathed.
Yeah, and the truth is you're not going to come out with everybody agreeing, because even when there were the meetings with the players and the owners and they decided that they would contribute almost $100 million to causes that are considered important to the African American community, it still didn't appease everybody because many thought of it as a sort of payoff to end their protest. And there are players, plenty of players that have, in addition to the protests, done the work in the offseason, whether that's donating money, meeting with Congress, having, meetings with local police departments and players to better understand each other. There's a lot of work being done that isn't being covered, which just reinforces why the protests were considered so powerful, right? Because making people uncomfortable is how you get them to talk about things. Otherwise, they'll happily ignore. And you know that because so many people who are against these protests are constantly coming out with the straw man of, well, what are these players doing? Why don't they move on to actually doing the work instead of just talking? Well, they are. It's not being covered in the same way because it's not as divisive, right? Actually going out and doing the work in the community is something that everybody sort of gets behind. And so people aren't going to write stories about that. They're going to write about the quote-unquote unpatriotic way that they're treating the flag and the anthem.
And that was the whole reason we got here to begin with, was that players have been doing work and good work in their communities for a long time. Maybe it wasn't always as pointed in the direction of police brutality and racial injustice, but guys have been going out and doing similar things in their communities for years. But you're right, it's never really been covered. And the whole idea of using this platform, of using the national anthem as a spot to bring light to this, was that it would be impossible to ignore and that it would rub people the wrong way. It would be a jarring visual, because otherwise we're conditioned to just put it off to the side and not pay attention to it.
Yeah, and I think part of that is, Kaepernick started out by just sitting and no one noticed. And then he actually spoke to a veteran, and the veteran said it's more respectful for you to kneel than to sit, for you to be in that position, to express your discontent in a way that is more palatable than sitting, where it just seems like you're not engaged. So he actually took the advice of a veteran and started the conversation that way, and it became so quickly spun as to be about patriotism that we've lost the point. And I think what's most upsetting to people who understand the plight of the players is how easy it feels for people to defend a symbol as opposed to people, right? And what does the anthem mean? What does the flag stand for? What does anything stand for if the point behind it is not a reality, right? So if you are in such defense of the anthem and the flag because you think that that's representative of our country, and you aren't angry about the fact that not everyone in our country is actually protected by the ideals that flag represents, then is that really patriotism, or is it empty kind of action in service of an idea that's not realistic?
Well, and it's not loving something. Like, if you claim to love something, then you understand its flaws. I mean, Sarah, you're married. I think in most committed relationships, you see that if you truly care about somebody, you understand the areas where they want to be better, and you're trying to, in some cases, help in that effort. And a country is no different. Looking at a country, that's what this was founded on, an idea that we believed that we could do some things better originally. And so that's why comments like the ones made today, I know President Donald Trump was on, I believe, Fox and Friends earlier, and made the comments essentially saying that even the players who are in the locker room should be out there, and that if you don't want to stand at attention for the flag, you shouldn't be in this country. That should be oddly terrifying, the idea that you're having choice removed, because people look at this as an incident that doesn't involve them. They say, well, I stand from the anthem, so they should too. But what if it was something that you did disagree with? What if it was something that mattered to you and all of a sudden your choice was removed? You would find yourself on a different side of the rule, and that's the place people don't consider enough is, what if the rule wasn't designed to work for me? What if I found myself the other way? How would I feel and how would I react?
Yeah, it's forced patriotism, right? And we look at other countries that do that and we criticize them, rightly so. And we talk about how we live in a fair and free country. But that kind of rhetoric, that if you don't want to have the forced patriotism of doing what I believe you should, then you should leave, is terrifying. And I think the problem is, as we said earlier, when this becomes about winning and losing and about two sides, and it's become so politicized and divisive as to not even anymore relate to the original cause, it's sort of lost. And that's why I'm kind of torn on understanding that if I was a player who had been kneeling and this cause was meaningful to me, I wouldn't want to stop, because it would feel like I was acquiescing to people who had spun my cause out of context and no longer were talking about the cause that I was trying to protest on behalf of. And I wouldn't want to stop and say, okay, you win, and go do something else. But at the same time, is this so lost that it means nothing anymore, and that you can't get people to talk about the cause you want to support because it's become all about this patriotism thing?
Once again, the onus has all been put on the players. Now, we've heard from Jed York, and we've heard from the president in New York with the Jets as well. Owners who are stepping up and saying, we're going to support our players, we're going to eat these fines, we're going to have their backs. But for the rest of it, from a league message to its players, they've put the onus back on them to do something and make it about something else, because they've created winners and losers. They've created a system where now it feels like one side is coming out of this at a disadvantage, and that never makes anyone feel good. That's why leaving this alone and just working through together would have been the way that allowed them to come out clean. But once you create sides, once you create us coming out on top and having to feel victorious, you create the need for a response.
Well, and it's not getting any better, unfortunately, for either side. Everybody is as angry, if not angrier, than they were before. And now it's created a whole nother set of problems where every game, are we going to interview the guys that were in the locker room? What did that mean? Why did you stay in there? The guys that do kneel, are you going to pay your fine, or is your owner going to pay it? Do we consider Chris Long putting his arm on the shoulder of a teammate raising his fist as an act of disrespect? Or is he still respecting the anthem because he's standing?
Yep.
It creates so many more questions than we already had. And speaking of questions, I have a lot of them for Big Baby. We'll get to that next.
Dan Le Batard.
We got a horse in the game, Dan.
We got a player in the race. The horse would be in the race.
Oh, whatever.
Stugotz.
We got a horse in the race.
Listen, I can mix and match cliches. I'm the cliche master. I can do whatever I want with my cliches.
You're
okay?
not
They're my cliches, Danny.
They're not yours. They're everybody's. And you're not the cliche master if you can't get them right. That doesn't make you the cliche master. That just makes you bad at speaking.
This is the Dan Le Batard Show with the Stugotz on ESPN Radio.
It's time for Straight Talk, brought to you by Straight Talk Wireless. Best phones, best networks, no contracts. And the Straight Talk, of course, involves Big Baby Davis, who, after recently being involved in some interesting conversations surrounding large sums of money in a hotel room, cash just surrounding him in a hotel room, we got the great sound and video of him on a private plane eating fried chicken with stacks of money around, including his Celtics ring on top of those stacks of money, explaining why whatever was being talked about with his motel was going to be exonerated. This after he had caused a disturbance at a hotel, and this is the video of the audio of the plane incident.
It's your boy, Big Baby, man. Don't believe all that on the internet. I will have my day in court. They just mad because a black man got money, man. Just trying to keep a black man down, man. Hey, man, shout out Rollo, man. All those people, man, getting money, man. Illegal, man. A lot of jump shots. A whole lot of jump shots. Popeye chicken.
Oh, the finish. Stuck the landing.
The Popeye's chicken shout-out really sealed it.
Yes, this, of course, was just money made from a lot of jump shots and not any of the marijuana that they found in the hotel room with him.
Like, how do you look at that sum of money and think, yeah, it was $92,000 in cash wrapped in rubber bands?
Right.
Like, has
Yes.
any legitimately earned currency ever been given out in that amount, in those denominations, in rubber bands?
Yeah, so he had 126 grams of marijuana, packing materials, a ledger with language consistent with the sale of controlled substances, and a briefcase with $92,164.
It looked baller, though. Like the ring on top. The ring was a nice garnish on top of it.
It was a nice touch. Yeah. It was like a money cake with a ring garnish on top.
Which is, if we all had had the ability to do, would do. Like, we would all love to be able to make a money cake or a gold Scrooge McDuck bath if we had the opportunity to. He just took that opportunity.
He did it. And that was back in March when we heard that amazing tape. Let's hear it one more time.
It's your boy, Big Baby, man. Don't believe all that on the internet. I will have my day in court. They just mad because a black man got money, man. Just trying to keep a black man down, man. Hey, man, shout out Rollo, man. All those people, man, getting money, man. Illegal, man. A lot of jump shots. A whole lot of jump shots. Popeye chicken.
He will have his day in court because he's been arrested again. This time for felony assault with intent to cause a great bodily injury. He almost hit a man with his car, according to TMZ, and then he slammed him onto the concrete after the victim confronted him. The victim was hospitalized for facial fractures, a broken tooth, and broken ribs. Big Baby surrendered on Friday, was booked and released on $50,000 bail, which is really nothing. He's got 92 in cash.
Say, you're sitting on that in cash. Imagine what's actually in the bank. It's a lot of jump shots.
It's a whole lot of jump shots.
That's once you've gotten through the initial wave, isn't that always the sign that you probably need to lay low for a little bit? Like, you get popped on these, arrested with 126 grams of marijuana and all that cash, and you're like, all right, you know what? I'll have my day in court. I'm pretty confident I'll get through this. But the logic would, again, maybe applying logic to a situation where you're on a plane eating chicken with 92 grand in cash next to you probably escapes. But the logic after that would probably be, let's lay low for a little while. Let's maybe not get into any altercations.
So if I go all in with Glenn Big Baby Davis getting arrested, is that the most not surprising news of the day story? Or would I impress you a bit more with the name Lenny Dykstra?
Oh, boy.
Oh, yeah. So this is perhaps a more serious incident than mere felony assault with an intent to cause great bodily harm. Lenny Dykstra busted with cocaine after holding a weapon to an Uber driver's head and threatening to kill him. So, essentially, he was carrying a stash of drugs, including cocaine, held up a gun, or a weapon, says a weapon, and threatened to kill the driver. The police said that they haven't specified what the weapon is, so we will wait and see. But the driver had picked him up in New Jersey, and the player requested to change his destination. The cabbie refused and drove to the police station instead and started honking his horn repeatedly.
Wow.
Trying to get the attention of the police, and then fled the car, leaving Dykstra inside. The cops searched the car, did not find a weapon, but did find cocaine, marijuana, and ecstasy. He was charged with making terroristic threats and drug possession.
So he combined all of the elements of the Big Baby story into one. He had the drugs all in one place. Mm-hmm. He had the assault portion of this all in one place, and now is being treated accordingly by the law.
Except for the fact that he was released on his own recognizance.
Oh, okay. And he didn't have 92 grand in cash.
That is true. This, of course, not the first time Dykstra has had a run-in with the law. He was charged with indecent exposure, selling valuables from his mansion in violation of the terms of bankruptcy, obviously drug stuff, drunk driving, sexual assault allegations, sex harassment arrest, indecent exposure for exposing himself to 6 women at least that he met on Craigslist, and then, of course, fighting with Lena Dunham on Twitter.
It's been a hell of a timeline there. And thankfully for Lenny Dykstra, he doesn't play football, or else he would be told that he now has CTE too.
Right. Also, but he would still be picked up by the Cowboys.
Don Batard.
You are the best, and when I say the best, I mean the very worst and most evil.
Stugotz.
The worst.
But this time, it's for real.
worst.
This is the Dan Le Batard Show with the Stugotz on ESPN Radio.
Let's head to the Shell Pennzoil Performance Line where my buddy ESPN senior writer Arash Markazi joins us. You can follow him on Twitter at Arash Markazi. So the lineup, the matchup is set. It's going to be the Capitals versus the Golden Knights, and Arash always gets the plum gigs, which means hanging out in Vegas for the first ever Stanley Cup final involving a Vegas professional hockey team. So now that we know that the Caps are in, Arash, does this change anything about how you're predicting, the series goes, not on the ice, but in general, the coverage and the storylines?
No, I kind of figured if it was Tampa Bay, it would have been a harder route because, the first two games would have been in Tampa Bay. A potential Game 7 would have been in Tampa Bay. That would have been hard. But now Vegas not only is in the Stanley Cup Finals, but has the first two games, has a potential Game 7. So I'm a little bit more confident, and I know Capital fans don't want to hear that. But listen, this is a team of destiny. They found a way to win, and whenever they've won, by the way, they've won on the road. So they could potentially close this out on the road, but you want that potential Game 7 to be at home.
Arash, I guess for people that will now be tuning in that have seen this Golden Knights story from afar all season long, we know Marc-Andre Fleury has been the big source in the goal for them and hot during the playoffs, but what else should people know about this team going into this series from a hockey perspective?
The amazing thing is they have so many guys on this team that have had career years. Wild Bill Carlson. Everyone's calling him Wild Bill. By the way, the reason he has that nickname is he's the quietest guy on the team. So, he's never scored more than 20 goals. He's a 43-goal scorer. Jonathan Marchessault is really kind of like the captain of that team. Again, these are guys that they got from the expansion draft. These teams could have protected a ton of guys, left these guys not protected. And so what happened with this team, guys, I think they all had a chip on their shoulder. And when you get a group of guys who don't feel wanted, who felt like their former teams didn't want them, they all came together with something to prove, including the coach who got fired, including the GM who got fired. George McPhee put that Washington team together, got fired because they were not able to win it all, and amazingly, in 1 year, could build a team that beats his old team.
Talking to Arash Markazi about the upcoming Stanley Cup Final, which you're going to need to learn, Arash, otherwso hockey people are going to be at your head. It is the Stanley Cup Final.
It used to be the finals, now it's the final.
No.
Yeah.
It's always been the final. So you avoided, or I guess you didn't get to participate in the Stanley Cup final between the two best strip club cities in America. So now you've got to find a way to turn D.C. into as exciting a destination as Tampa Bay. Do you think that there's a part of this Capitals team that because of the strife that D.C. fans have felt collectively amongst their many teams failing to compete well on the highest stage, that maybe some of the people who would be rooting for the Knights might be flipping over and saying this is something the Capitals earn as opposed to the team in its first season?
I can see that, and I can see people saying, Ovechkin has been one of the great players, and he deserves it, and I get that. But this Vegas Golden Knights story, if you've enjoyed the story, if you think it's a Cinderella story, if you think it's a fantastic story, you're still going to pull for them because it's an incredible story that will become a film one day when you talk about all these guys coming in with like a chip on their shoulder and having something to prove. I still think it's great, but listen, good for Washington. This is the first team of the Big Four that have gone to a championship game in 20 years, so it would be fantastic. So there's no losers here, but my goodness, if an expansion team wins in their first year, that would be incredible.
Talking to ESPN senior writer Arash Markazi on the Shell Pennzoil Performance Line. And we've seen the Capitals get close to this stage for so long, even getting up to the conference finals. And I guess that's been part of it, like Sarah mentioned, is the constant close proximity to that threshold. With Vegas, this is the first rattle out of the box. Are we expecting this team to hold this level of play in coming seasons? Can this be, now that we've talked about how abnormal this season has been, is this a team we can expect to compete like this year in and year out for a while?
Mike, they're going to have the core coming back. I think James Neal is like the one superstar player on this team that might not be back, but the core group that you see in Game 1 will be the core group that I think comes back for next season. But just this incredible run that they've had. I've kind of cautioned some of these fans and some of these reporters that this is not normal. You could put the best team on ice together, and it doesn't happen always like this. And so, listen, I just tell them to enjoy this. I know you've got the core of the team locked up long-term, but this isn't going to happen again. I mean, you might not see this for another 20 years, and so enjoy this. I know it's hard to say because it's their first year. They don't know any better. But just because you have the same team doesn't mean you're going to have the same kind of success on the ice.
Talking to Arash Markazi, he is this week's guest on my podcast. That's What She Said with Sarah Spain. You can find it on the ESPN app, podcast app, iTunes, etc. And one of the things we talk about on the podcast with Arash is how he's always in the right place at the right time, and he always manages to get the story that you weren't even looking for. So, that being said, are there stories that you're looking for, maybe off the ice, whether it's somewhere in Vegas or a person or place that you think the fans need to know about?
So, Hauser Ovechkin, I've heard, likes to party, and there's no better party city in America than Las Vegas. And so, I will be at the clubs strictly in a reporting role, Sarah. It's Memorial Day weekend. There's a lot of great pool parties, so I got to be in the right place at the right time. So I'll tell my editors, listen, if you want me to be there, I got to go to Excess, and I got to go to Marquee, and I got to go to all these places. It's hard work, but somebody has to do it.
So does that mean we can expect you to be in the right place in the right time in Nashville for the 2019 NFL Draft?
Yes,
I mean, how far
by the way, I was so bummed that it wasn't Vegas and Nashville in the Western Conference Finals. It would have been so good. But now I get to go to Nashville. I've never gone to Nashville. I've heard so many great things about it.
What?
I know.
How do you call yourself a party reporter, which you don't call yourself, but we call you, and not have been out there at the honky-tonks on Broadway?
I know.
Fitz would be so disappointed. All right, so before we let you go, Arash, we do need to get a prediction because everybody knows Le Batard Radio is all about predictions. What do you think is going to happen in this series?
I like Las Vegas in 7. I think it is really crucial that they did get that home game, and here's why. They've closed out a series in 4, 5, and 6 in the first 3 rounds. I do think that this will go 7. I think it'll be a fantastic series. No losers, but there's got to be a storybook finish to the storybook season for the Vegas Golden Knights. So Vegas wins the Stanley Cup at home, and they party on the street for a full week.
Oh, okay. It's a lot of predictions. I've written them all down, and you will be punished if any of them are wrong. Hey, thanks for your time. Appreciate it. And save your liver, buddy, okay?
I'll try. Thanks.
Be safe. Be safe out there. Sarah Spain and Mike Golick Jr. filling in for the guys. It's the Dan Le Batard Show with Stugotz on ESPN Radio, the ESPN app, and Sirius XM Channel 80.
Catch more of the Dan Le Batard Show with the Stugotz, 10 to 1 Eastern on ESPN Radio and ESPN News.
This is your bedroom. This is your bedroom with Blue Chew. Blue Chew uses the same active ingredients as in Viagra or Cialis, but now comes in chewable form. Chewable means better, cheaper, and works faster than pills. No in-person doctor visit, no waiting in line, no more awkwardness. 100% online at BlueChew.com, where your first order is free. Just pay $5 shipping. Use promo code DAN at BlueChew.com and restart the party.
Dan Le Batard.
Man, you have no journalistic responsibility.
Stugotz.
Yep, and I love it.
This is the Dan Le Batard Show with the Stugotz on ESPN Radio.
Sarah Spain and Mike Golick Jr. filling in for Dan and Stu. It's the Dan Le Batard Show with Stugotz on ESPN Radio, the ESPN app, and Sirius XM Channel 80. Coming up a little bit later this hour, we'll talk to Ryan Hollins about last night's NBA game and tonight's game between the Warriors and the Rockets. It's coming up a little bit later in this hour.
ESPN Radio is presented by Progressive Insurance. Guests on the Dan Le Batard Show appear via the Shell Pennzoil Performance Line. And now your SportsCenter update. The New York Rangers announced today that the team has named David Quinn the team's new head coach. The Detroit Pistons have hired Memphis Grizzlies executive Ed Stefanski as senior advisor responsible for overhauling the franchise's basketball operations. Good luck with that. And finally, according to NPR, many famed Vegas casinos could be hobbled as thousands of hospitality workers authorized to strike. The Culinary Workers Union, Nevada's largest labor organization, voted Tuesday to authorize a citywide strike for 50,000 members once their contracts expire on June 1st if their demands are not met. About 25,000 members weighed in on the measure, with 99% approving a walkout, according to the union.
That could be bad for the old Stanley Cup final, about to start in Vegas.
That victory parade, though, is going to be unregulated chaos.
What are they going to eat?
That is true. Panic in the streets. The strip clubs are going to have to step up big.
That's right. Spearmint Rhino, it's on you.
Guys, you know me. I like to be in the action. If you need tickets to the game or your favorite band, look no further than Vivid Seats, the official ticket partner of ESPN. Vivid Seats has options to fit your needs. Make sure you get to vividseats.com/ESPN today for an exclusive discount offer. For all the latest headlines and information, tune into SportsCenter on ESPN Radio all throughout the day.
Sarah Spain and Gojo filling in for the guys today on the Dan Le Batard Show with Stugotz. Would you like the bad news or the worst news first?
Oof. Let's go in order. Let's go bad news first.
All right. Well, depending on whether or not you are a fan of Richie Incognito, this story could be slightly funny. It could be depressing. It could be sad. It could be bad. But I'm going to start with this one. Richie Incognito has been placed on psychiatric hold after a gym altercation. Law enforcement telling TMZ that he was placed on that involuntary psychiatric hold, which is technically not an arrest, but a forced mental evaluation. Not the first time this has happened. Same thing happened a few years ago after the Jonathan Martin bullying scandal. But this one was because he was at an upscale Florida gym, and an alleged victim claims he threw a dumbbell at him. Allegedly, he first threw a tennis ball at him for no reason, and then grabbed a dumbbell and threw that at him as well. The alleged victim says Incognito was rambling about the government and screaming at the man to, quote, get off my bleeping playground. So the cops were called to the gym. They met with Incognito, taken by police. They don't say whether he was formally arrested, but he is now undergoing that psychiatric evaluation.
That is pretty bad. That's a pretty bad start. And Richie Incognito is a very interesting case of this, because when I hear that, because I know people that know Richie and because he's in a tough place right now, I think with very serious mental issues, it makes me sad because you see in this situation someone so clearly out of sorts that they're in a bad place, but because of his reputation and because of the things that transpired in Miami, I feel like normally when we see this stuff out of former players, the same sympathies aren't really going to be applied here, and it involves throwing weights.
Yeah, and I think if there is some sort of mental illness contributing to his behavior, when that manifests itself in the way it did with Jonathan Martin, I think that makes it very tough for people to summon up sympathy, even if it may be deserved. I was at a Super Bowl party a couple of years ago, and I was hanging out with Michael Silver, who's friends with Richie Incognito. Before he walked over, Michael said, oh, by the way, he's going by Richard now. And I said, excuse me? And he said, yeah, he's trying to revamp his image. He's with, the Bills now, and he's, being talked about as a good teammate and whatever. So he's going by Richard now. And I suggested that Dick might be a better name as a nickname for Richie. And I just thought to myself how quickly some people were willing to sort of rewrite what they thought about him based on a year or two without major incident in Buffalo.
Yeah, again, it's a super fine line in that, because we remember how complex the Jonathan Martin situation ended up becoming when all the text messages get leaked out. We've seen since the things that Jonathan Martin has been through that could be mental health related as well, posting the pictures of the gun and the statements that he made, I think, on his Snapchat or on his Instagram feed. So there were so many layers to that, but it is always interesting having been around Richie Incognito, the person, versus all these things you hear, and I guess trying to reconcile all the parts of a person and then watch them go through something that, we would apply sympathy elsewhere. Is it right to withhold sympathy based on what we know? I'm not really sure the answer there, but it makes it a very strange lens to view a lot of the problems that we view that happened to former players through. We've seen plenty of players struggle with mental illness, struggle after their playing careers are over, and it's always interesting to gauge the response. Worth noting, too, though, that beyond the stuff with Jonathan Martin, who himself seems to be struggling with something, there were the jokes about shooting black people, there were the comments of the racial taunts to the Asian American trainer, there was homophobic taunting of other players. So Richie Incognito's issues in that locker room were not solely based around Martin. Oh, no, and going back into his college career, there have been very real anger management issues and things that have popped up along the way for him. Richie's past is well documented for sure. Right. All right, well, do you want the worst news now? Oh, yeah, break it down. As they would say here on the Le Batard Show, they got Morgan Freeman. This, according to a CNN story,
involving 16 sources, 8 of whom alleged that they suffered harassment and sexual nature from Morgan Freeman. And one of the most damning pieces of this story is one that says several times during this investigation, when a CNN reporter contacted a person who had worked with Freeman to try to ask them if they've seen or been subjected to inappropriate behavior by an actor they had worked with, not initially even naming the actor they were asking about, the person would immediately tell them they knew exactly who the reporter had in mind, Morgan Freeman.
Wow.
Not a good sign.
No, not a good one. And when we were searching this before, you see it come up right next to other headlines like Morgan Freeman now going to be the voice for what? The Vancouver transit system?
Yes, your trains and everything else will be
if you
next stop.
Yeah, you've announced that. I mean, the guy who has literally been the voice of God for so many people, you've seen that no one is really recused from this. And you read the accounts of this and you see the things that have come up, and I guess it's one of those things that, like you said, when you talk to someone close to it, they're not surprised. And when you read these accounts, maybe we shouldn't have been either.
Yeah, this is not so. The story starts off with reports from a production assistant from a 2015 movie who said unwanted touching, comments about her figure and clothing on a near daily basis. He would rest his hand on her lower back or rub her lower back. On one occasion, kept trying to lift up her skirt and asking if she was wearing underwear. Another woman who is a senior member of the production staff of a 2012 movie said there was sexual harassment for her and her female assistant on numerous occasions, making comments about their bodies. Also, later on in the story, it said that it is not related relegated just to people on the staff of his movies, but also reporters. Some have said that he, in interactions with them, also said inappropriate things, including one woman who was pregnant. And he said to her, "You are ripe," and repeatedly said, "Boy, do I wish I was there," looking her up and down. And there were multiple reporters at different junkets who said that he made inappropriate comments to them. And of course, as with many of these stories, most said that they didn't tell because they were at a very low level within the production and didn't feel like they would be listened to or heard, or that it might cause issues for them employment-wise.
For this, too, just for clarity's sake, this is part of an investigation I've seen on CNN, but is this part of any sort of legal proceeding? Like, is there anyone that's pressing charges or sort of similar to what we've seen with Bill Cosby and the way that legal proceedings have come, or is this purely reporting that has unearthed these situations?
It doesn't seem like there is any legal action being taken. I'm just skimming this, though. It's a pretty long story. I don't see anything about anything beyond just an investigation that began and then spread out to them speaking to a pretty big number of people. We are also hearing now that Harvey Weinstein is likely to be arrested very soon by the New York Police Department. And also there was a headline about Brad Pitt saying he wanted to murder him.
Yeah, I saw that. A strong response, and I guess as these things come out, it has to be jarring information to find out that people you care about were treated in this way, right? Like, I feel as we've all sort of had the veil lifted on these things, there could potentially be, as far-fetched as it sounds, people within the industry finding out things about coworkers or former, former companions that they care about who have had these things done to them and that have been withheld from them for all this time in the same way. It has to be a tremendously tense time.
Yeah, Gwyneth Paltrow was on Howard Stern Wednesday, said that she and Brad Pitt were at the opening of a Hamlet production on Broadway. Harvey was there, and Brad Pitt, it was like the equivalent of throwing Weinstein against the wall, energetically, Paltrow said. It was so fantastic because what he did was he leveraged his fame and power to protect me at a time when I didn't have fame or power yet. It was fantastic. He's a good person, and Harvey was never inappropriate with me again. Pitt told the producer, "If he ever made Paltrow feel uncomfortable again, I'll kill you," she added. This was after she was alone in a hotel room with him. He attempted to massage her, invited her to his bedroom, and then never did it again after Pitt confronted him. There's all these questions, of course, about various people who knew via their significant others or women friends and didn't say anything publicly either. And it's complicated, right? We're seeing more and more the complications of going public. We saw in that Ronan Farrow story the incredible lengths to which Weinstein attempted to shut down Rose McGowan and others using, literal spies to try to derail them. So it can be dangerous beyond just career implications.
Yeah, it certainly can, but we've seen there's power in numbers, and it's the now as we see more and more of, because this is part of the story about the volume now of people and the complaints and the accounts of harassment from Morgan Freeman that are being reported on here in CNN. So you have groups that are recognizing and seeing in other instances that we've gotten through this Me Too movement, the amount of power that there is in numbers to shape these kind of outcomes. And so as we continue with this, it's the idea now to make sure that that's continued to use responsibly to point these things out and to continue to shift the way we look at these situations.
Right, and we're all talking about how things have so drastically changed, and yet not really, because we've seen so few actually be severely negatively impacted by this. We are hearing already about Charlie Rose and others trying to make comebacks. And there was an interesting story in the New York Times with the cast of Arrested Development about the upcoming season. I recommend you guys read it. Jessica Walter, who plays Lucille Bluth, talks about being verbally harassed by Jeffrey Tambor, who, of course, is going through allegations of sexual harassment on the set of Transparent. And the men on the show sort of continued to interrupt her as she's crying, talking about the incident and excusing it. It's a very, very uncomfortable read, especially for someone who's a big fan of that show and those actors. But it's complicated, and now Morgan Freeman will be the latest to have to face the allegations. Sarah Spain and Mike Golick Jr. filling in for the guys. It's the Dan Le Batard Show with Stugotz on ESPN Radio, the ESPN app, and Sirius XM Channel 80. Coming up, Gronk's horses' odds are exactly what you'd expect them to be.
Nice.
Dan Le Batard.
Tom Ricketts is saying that the Cubs will not allow Sammy Sosa back into that organization for anything moving forward until he comes clean. And what I find absurd about that, and what a hypocrite this guy is that family made hundreds of millions of dollars off the name Sammy Sosa. By the way, never tested positive for steroid use. And if he was using steroids, which we all assume that he was, my guess is if he was using it, the Ricketts family had an inkling that was going on in their own clubhouse. And for him to come out many, many years later and say Sammy Sosa must come clean for us to allow him back into our prestigious organization, our club, get out of here with that.
Stugotz.
Yeah, Ricketts didn't make money off Sammy Sosa. He won the bid in 2009. This was post-Sammy Sosa.
Well, that ruins my argument.
This is the Dan Le Batard Show with the Stugotz on ESPN Radio.
Stu's got to stop hating on my Cubs. He's just jellyfish with Theo Epstein because he's friends with his boy, Eddie Vedder, and the Cubs won a World Series.
The Eddie Vedder thing was always a huge hang-up with Stu.
Oh, it still is.
He's never going to get over that.
Still is. Sarah Spain and Mike Golick Jr. filling in for the guys. It's the Dan Le Batard Show with Stugotz on ESPN Radio, the ESPN app, and Sirius XM Channel 80. If you missed any of the show, you can listen to all 3 hours of the Dan Le Batard Show on demand in the ESPN app, plus our Miami-only hour that airs before the show, and now you can subscribe to the Best of podcast. It's all available in the Listen tab of the ESPN app. While you're in there, you might as well download Spain and Fitz, and That's What She Said with Sarah Spain, and First and Last, and Golick and Wingo?
Yeah, no, I'm on 2 hours of that now, so you can just at least listen to the first half.
Got them all. I don't know if you guys saw that show spirit animal Rob Gronkowski's horse is finally ready to get back in the race. Missed the Kentucky Derby, but will be competing at the Belmont Stakes in June, and the odds makers got jokes. They started out this horse at 69-1.
And the race is on June 9th, right? Like it's all so perfect.
Oh, yes, 6-9.
Everything he's ever wanted is coming together.
Yeah, the signs are all pointing to glory at Belmont.
I'm really excited for him. I would love, because I know people have always talked about petitioning for Gronk to be able to wear the number 69, and he's taped it on jerseys and stuff. But what if he just went full? You know how LeBron James, there's that great picture of him being interviewed by reporters, and you see from the back the tattoo that says The Chosen One?
Right.
What if Gronk just had a big back tattoo, and it was just
Tattooed
69?
The 69.
Like, just made it really...
So, like, really old Gronk, like a 69-year-old Gronk? Nice. Just still has like a wrinkly old back jersey number.
Well, it's never going to not be funny to him. Like as Gronk ages,
like he's going to mature.
No, ever.
He's going to Benjamin Button probably. This might be peak maturity for him.
this is as good as it's going to get, so I feel like it's the perfect peak to get the 69 tattoo.
He should get some tips from Ben Affleck on really great back tattoos.
Oh, man.
That's the guy to go to. If you're hearing that voice laughing in the background, it's because Ryan Hollins is in studio out in Bristol and is going to join us for the next segment to talk NBA, but might as well have him chime in here because we haven't gotten yet to the police the police video from Milwaukee for Sterling Brown. And this was highly anticipated. Talked about it on Spain and Fitz, particularly that there was an assistant police chief speaking in a church in Milwaukee asking that everybody prepared to help them through the challenges that they would face after the video was released, which I found particularly nauseating. And the Bucks have released a statement about the police video that occurred when Sterling Brown, who was a rookie this season, parked illegally in a handicapped spot outside of a Walgreens at 2 a.m., was approached by an officer, was eventually surrounded by so many officers. It was not something you'd expect for a generic, parking ticket stop, and was eventually brought to the ground and stun-gunned. And in the video, the only real pushback that Sterling Brown seems to be giving is that he has his hands in his pockets and said he had his hands full. And before he even had a moment really to fully respond, he was taken down by the multiple officers. Gojo, what was your response to actually seeing the video after hearing about it for several days?
Yeah, because especially the video is a half hour long, damn near, and we're seeing the clips that have been shown over and over again on TV. The response before told me a lot about what we were going to see. In the actual video, I think the only thing you can say Sterling Brown is guilty of is maybe just having a bit of an attitude with the police officers in this situation. You could see both were kind of quipping at each other, but then for me there was a very clear line in this where it went from somewhat routine, maybe a little bit contentious just because of the tone of their voices, to ridiculous. And it's this idea of, he was parked across a handicap spot, running into a CVS quickly, came back outside, and the officer called for backup. And I don't know enough about this. I understand Sterling Brown is 6'6", he's a big guy, but calling for backup in a situation where it sounded like the issue should have just been he should have been written a ticket and then gone on his way, because if you suspected he was under the influence, you would have issued some sort of field sobriety test, I have to imagine. And so that was never put on the table. So all he is guilty of is parking in these spots illegally outside of a Walgreens, which to me doesn't require an armada as a response. And then everything that escalated from there seemed to be on an overreaction to something that could have been solved simply by that. If there's someone with some more information about policing that could tell me what's normal in that situation and not, I'd be open, but that didn't feel normal.
Yeah, in the video, the police officer meets him at his driver's side door as he walks out of the store, starts firing off questions one after another, asking for his driver's license, demanding to know why he parked that way, repeatedly ordering him to back up, telling him he's getting in his face, as Brown says not to touch him. And then he said, "Are you obstructing me? I just told you to back up." He said, "I did. You touched me first." And then there's barely a minute when the officer calls for another squad car and says, "We're going to figure out what we're going to do." And then Brown says, "You can't do that by yourself," which would be my response to a potential parking violation, right? Why would you call 3 more cars of officers? And then it has to be noted that the one officer did say, "I didn't call for all these guys. I didn't mean for all these people to be here." But in the end, he ends up being surrounded by officers for, again, parking in a handicap spot outside Walgreens. And at one point when he asked him to take his hands out of his pockets, he said he had stuff, and then he gets pulled to the ground and is tased. Ryan, what did you make of this video?
I'm trying to speak wisely, and I think I'm going to use a lot of patience before jumping to a conclusion in this. And I want to put myself in the shoes of the police officers, and I want to justify this somehow. Not saying that I can. I want to try to justify, because you got to keep in mind the police are the people who keep you safe. But I ask myself, why? Why did we need so many policemen? What was the threat? Did I look at Sterling and say, this guy he's armed? Did I look at him like Golick just threw out and said he's a large individual? We can't take him down. He's hostile for some reason. Maybe he's a little mouthy. Maybe he's a little annoyed. He's in a really nice car. Is he a drug dealer? No, I don't think this is a drug dealer. This kid doesn't look like a drug dealer. He doesn't fit the mold. Why are we doing what we're doing? I can't grab a reason for that many police officers to do that unless if this was a macho, let me show my way, let me preach to you who I am. Now, amongst the African-American community, if this was me talking to another fellow NBA player or another young African-American male, I would say don't get an attitude with the police. You are at their mercy. You are at their mercy. Don't put yourself in a position, man. You never know what could happen. Don't be out late night after 10 o'clock, after midnight. Nothing good happen. We've all heard that from our parents. And I want to ask you guys, should we have to send that message to the next NBA player or young African-American male? Like, should I have to say, oh, it's a double standard, guys. Don't do it.
Yeah, we'll talk about it next. Sarah Spain and Mike Golick Jr. with Ryan Hollins on the Dan Le Batard Show with Stugotz.
Dan Le Batard.
Why do we still do this, honestly?
Why do we still work with him? Why do we put ourselves in this position?
Through.
Why do we work with this person? We should stop working with him.
Yeah.
We have offers.
We need to find something. You have offers. I don't have offers.
Stugotz.
Oh, hey, Dan.
Hey, man, what's up?
Back. We were just talking about how much of a delight you are.
So we pivoted. I think we're in a good place this year.
Yeah, it's going to be so good this year. Get ready.
Great to see you guys so confident.
Yeah. Flying high.
Yep. This is going to be an utter disaster.
He's still here.
I've been working with him for 12 years, and I still go home upset with myself that I allow this to happen.
I am clinically depressed because of this guy.
By the way, support group at my house on Wednesday night.
Really?
Yeah.
I need it after this. I'll see you there.
I hate him.
This is the Dan Le Batard Show with the Stugotz on ESPN Radio.
Mike Golick Jr. and Sarah Spain in for the guys. Ryan Hollins continues to be in with us. You can hear him on all of our ESPN stations talking NBA, and we will get to that in just a minute, but I wanted to follow up our conversation about Sterling Brown. Worth noting, by the way, that the Sterling Brown tape released on the same day that the NFL amends their stance on the anthem, and the same day that the Bucks release a statement talking about how what happened to Sterling Brown isn't an isolated case. It shouldn't require an incident involving a professional athlete to draw attention to the fact that vulnerable people in our communities have experienced similar and even worse treatment. And if you keep asking and you're whatabouting the NBA's policy on the anthem instead of recognizing their progressive views and the way that they've given freedoms to their players to express social issues and opinions using T-shirts and microphones on the court before the game, then you're simply looking for a reason to debate instead of addressing the issues in the NFL head on. But that being said, Ryan asked us an important question, and I think I agree that, unfortunately, the only recourse, even in a situation where it feels like you're being treated unfairly, is to respond with politeness and address police officers with respect and do what they say. And it's sad, honestly, that we have to tell people of color to be careful after certain hours of the day or, to always have their hands visible and things that aren't expected of everybody else.
I think that's the part here that's frustrating is because we were, I was told from a young age to always, be polite when addressing a police officer and how to conduct yourself. If I get stopped and pulled over for speeding or anything else, the first thing I do is turn off the engine, keys on the dashboard. Like you're told all of the tricks, but the difference anytime I talk to, my African-American teammates or guys that I knew, which is just the way that it's framed to you and it's highlighted by some of the examples we've seen where even doing all the right things doesn't necessarily get you that protection. And it's exactly what Ryan said. It's that you're told from an early age, you're at their mercy, you're going to be treated differently, so you have to do everything right. And it's more life or death then.
And man, I got to be honest, man, this is hurting my heart right now because there's kids out there losing their life from this stuff, man. There's kids that are being killed. And I know Sterling made it away from this, but it's a kid out there that's being shot and killed over that. It's just stupid. It's stupid, man. And my heart goes to the families because it's not okay. And I hope we make change. And I hope it's the NBA behind this. I hope whatever it is, man. I mean, I understand the double standard. I know this world. I know what goes on, but it's tough, man. Though you don't get your kids back. You know what I'm saying? Like you don't get them back, and that sucks. And I know, man, Trayvon Martin It's happened. It's lived on, and it hasn't seemed to have gotten any better. And these are young kids with futures and bright, man. And we've all been dumb, ignorant kids. And I'm sure he was a little mouthy. I'm sure he made mistakes, but darn, you lose your life over this. And I know Sterling didn't lose his life, but there are kids losing their life over stuff like that, man. It hurts me to my soul that this happens, and I pray we make a change. And I don't know what communication needs to be had between police and these young, I don't want to just say African-American male, because it happens to our brown brothers too out there. And it just needs to be a connection, man, because this stuff is so unnecessary, man. Don't lose your life over something you don't need to have, man. Gosh.
Yeah, I think what you said about mistakes is the thing that stands out the most when there are people whose argument against talking about these issues in a meaningful way is that, well, he should have complied or he didn't do exactly what was said. You know, there are so many white kids who have made egregious mistakes, far worse than what has cost the lives of African-American youth. And even in instances where they did follow, you know, Philando Castilla is a perfect example. There's just, Tamir Rice is another one that's just heartbreaking, right? There's plenty of little white boys who are allowed to play in the park with a BB gun or worse, not just a little plastic one, and it hasn't ended up costing them their life. So the idea that the mistakes you make as a kid cost you your life is
and I want to throw out too, man, like anger is not the way. Like, we don't need to go fight the police. Like, those things don't need to be our enemies, but man, they got to change their ways. Mm-hmm. This isn't like, hey, tear down the walls, forget the police. Like, that's not the message, man. And I tell you one thing, that ain't the way you solve it.
No. And I think that's why we mentioned the timing of that release with the NFL decision, and it continues to highlight you have that in conjunction with what the police department came out and said prior to this, the Buck statement, and you wrap it all together and say these can be either the signs that we still have a long way to go, the idea that you've got a league that's legislating the ability to protest out of their league for guys who have been behind causes like this, or you can say, well, there are guys in that league and in the NBA and in other leagues that are working towards this, that are trying to have more places where outreach between communities and police are taking place. You're having a police department respond and say, we understand all our officers aren't bad people, but we are going to hold the people that are wrong accountable for these things. And you've got a league in the NBA that's also going to highlight and pursue that. So I think you can look at that and at least say, all right, we've got people that genuinely care about this, that are committed to making change, and based on this response in this one instance, you might be seeing a beginning of that, just a small bit of that.
I do think that there is change slowly coming our way simply because of the conversations we're having and because of the videos, because you can't keep denying it when it's staring you right in the face. And that's what we saw the police reacting to in terms of Sterling Brown. Who knows how this would have been received and how it would have been reported if not for them knowing that the video was on its way out.
You can listen to the Dan Le Batard Show with the Stugotz 10 to 1 Eastern on ESPN Radio, and you can watch on ESPN News.
I'm a one-trick pony, literally. I show up at kids' parties and act cute. That's pretty much it. So excuse me for being bitter when Geico says not only could we save you money on car insurance, but we do more. Like give you 24/7 access online, over the phone, or even via our award-winning mobile app. Well, ooh la la, aren't they multi-talented? Hey, I said organic carrots.
Geico. Expect great savings and a whole lot more.